Hi y'all, welcome to my channel. My name is Cami and I create content around curly hair, makeup, festivals, and travel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about 10 basic makeup terms, how to use them, when to use them, where to apply them, and then put them all together to create this look. If you want to see how I create this look, keep on watching and don't forget to subscribe. So I wanted to film today's video because of my husband. When he was watching last week's video, he had so many questions around the different terms like baking or highlighting, which I thought was really funny. And then I started thinking, I wonder how many people have the same questions around those terms. So let's get started. What I'm gonna do is kind of walk through my makeup and then introduce each new term as I have to use it on my face. All right, but first I gotta pull my hair back. Okay, so I'm gonna start my makeup with priming, foundation, concealer, and then we'll go on to our first term, baking. Okay, so now that my primer, foundation, and concealer are on, let's talk about our first term, baking. We're not baking cookies over here, I wish. We're using a setting powder to set our face so that it doesn't budge. Now, you can use any kind of setting powder. I like to use a couple of different ones depending on the occasion. So for example, if I'm just gonna be out, hanging with my friends or going out for a night of fun, I would use something like the Anastasia loose setting powder. It's really great, and the best part is it's super affordable. Like, this is a huge container and it's not too bad. But if I know I'm gonna be taking pictures, I like to use something like the Lorac Mercier translucent setting powder, just because this doesn't really have flashback, which means that, when you take a picture, you can't see it in the picture under your eyes or wherever you use it to set. So the way that you would set or bake your face is you take a bit of the powder and either with a sponge like a beauty blender or with one of these setting little puffs, you would just tap it on the powder and then tap it in the areas that you want to set. So for example, for me, my under eyes crease really easily. So I'm going to use the powder to set under my under eyes. And you want to use quite a bit of powder. Like, you want it to look super white and like you've used way too much powder. I'm also going to use it on my forehead because I have oily skin. And then on my chin. My nose a bit. Just any area I want to like set in place, lock down, make sure my makeup doesn't budge. Some people like to chisel out their cheeks using baking as well, and you can also do that. So let's switch to the beauty blender, and the way that you would chisel out your cheeks would be, again, grab some more of the powder and then dip your beauty blender in there and then use the powder to chisel out a line. All right, and now that we've got all this powder on our face and we look crazy, we are baking. So I'll just give that a few minutes, let it warm up with the heat off your skin. And then once you've waited maybe a couple minutes, you can just dust it off. All right, let's go ahead and dust it off. I like to use a big powder brush just to dust it off my face. And then I take whatever is left and just, you know, move it around my face so that I'm setting the rest of my foundation too. Okay, now that I look pale as a ghost, let's give this face some definition. So let's move to our second term, contouring. Contouring is placing a contrasting dark powder or foundation or bronzer, or you can even use concealer in a darker shade to chisel out features of your face. So where to apply? You can apply on your forehead, your chin, to chisel out your cheeks, your nose, to define the features of your face. I like to use a bronzer, and I don't like to contour too much. I tend to contour in using like a 3 shape on my face. So let me show you. I'm gonna use the Fenty Beauty Private Island bronzer in order to contour. So I take a big fluffy bronzer brush. This is a JH02 by Morphe. And just load my brush, tap off the excess, and then we can start up here and add definition to my face. If you really want to chisel out your cheeks, you can give the illusion of having more prominent cheekbones. Some people like to do this with a gray toned powder. It really makes your cheeks stand out. I just use my bronzer. And then you can also use bronzer just to hit like the areas where the sun hit your face, like your nose. And then to contour your nose, you can use a smaller brush, like a blending brush, like so. This just gives your nose a bit more definition depending on the shape of your nose or what you want it to look like. It can look a bit harsh, so if you feel that it looks harsh, go ahead and take a powder brush and just blend it all in. Now you can also use a blush to contour, and this is our term number 3, draping. Draping is exactly the same as contouring, but instead of using a bronzer or a gray tone powder, you would use a blush. And so you would place it in the same areas, and it just gives a more youthful appearance to the look. A lot of people really like this. I think it makes you look a bit more sun-kissed and youthful. It definitely gives my skin a bit more definition, which is really great. Okay, so let's move on to our 4th term, highlighting. I think this is everyone's favorite makeup technique. It's definitely one of my favorites. I love highlighting. So highlighting is the opposite of contouring. So you would take a lighter powder, or you know, lighter concealer, lighter foundation, and just put it in areas that you want to highlight or stick out. So there are 2 different ways that you can do this. Let's say you want to highlight your under eyes so that they look lighter, or your T-zone. I do this all the time. I use concealer to go under my eyes and my T-zone and my chin, just to highlight those areas. But then after that, I take a shimmery powder or highlighter, and I apply it to areas that I want to highlight, like my cheekbones. You can also use it to highlight your brow bone, your inner corner, your cupid's bow, the bridge of your nose, pretty much anywhere you want to give definition to with, or like make it stick out. So today I'm going to use Prosecco Pop by BECCA. I love this. I just love their highlighters. They're so wonderful. I heard the news that they are closing their company, and it makes me really sad. I loaded up on their highlighters. I love them. They're like the best highlighters in the game. They're definitely my favorite. Okay, so I'm going to highlight my cheekbones. And you can use any kind of brush with this really. I use like a little fluffy brush. Sometimes I use something that's a little bit more defined if I want to pack it in a little bit tighter. But yeah, and you can even use your finger. I do that all the time to highlight my inner corners. And now we're glowing to the gods. Okay friends, let's talk about our next term, cut crease. A cut crease is using a lighter shade to create a sharp contrast on your eyelid against the shadow that you put in the back. So for a cut crease, I like to start with a wash of color over the eyelid and then using a lighter concealer or a primer. In this case, I'm using the Anastasia eye primer. I just like to cut with a really fine flat brush, like this one. I like to cut the crease lighter. So I'm not super talented at doing this yet. It takes a lot of practice to get really good. But basically I just look at where my crease is and the area below I paint it lighter. So I've done it on this eye. It's not super precise, but let's attempt it on this eye. This one absolutely takes a lot of practice. And as you can see, I've made it a lot lighter. So what you can do is apply a different color shadow or, you know, glitter, whatever you want to use, but it just makes it so that it stands out and creates a sharp contrast. Okay friends, let's talk about our next technique. It's called a halo eye, which is sometimes also called a spotlight eye. As you can see, what this means is you use dark shadow on the outer corner and the inner corner, and then you use a highlight shadow like this one in the middle of your eye to bring a highlight to the middle of your eye. You can use it at the top, you can use it at the bottom. I like to mix it up, and let me show you how I achieve this look. So I'm gonna take a darker purple for the outside and the inside, and with a tapered blending brush, I'm just gonna blend that up into maybe a bit of a cat eye shape. And then I'm also going to add that in the inner corner of my eye. Leaving the space in the middle kind of bare, because that's where we're going to put our highlight shade. Okay, so take your time blending that in. Once you have it blended out, you can go ahead and highlight in the middle of your eyelid with a highlight shade. So I'm using like a lighter pink, kind of a champagne pink. And I'm just popping it in there with my finger. I don't need a brush. And then what I'll do is use what's left over on my brush from that darker shade and kind of brush that in the bottom and up and in the inner corner towards the middle. Blend that a bit better. And then maybe use a very tiny detailed brush to put that in the middle of my bottom lash. Okay, and that's how you create a spotlight or halo eye. Okay friends, our next term is tightlining. Tightlining is applying eyeliner under your lashes instead of on your lash line at the top. So what I like to do is I take a an eyeliner pencil using the Urban Decay 24/7 Glide On Eye Pencil. I love this one, it's really great. And this is gonna look a bit crazy, so just bear with me. So instead of going above my lash line like we usually would do when we're lining our eyes, you go below. So there are a couple ways to do this. You have to get close to your eye, so if you don't like getting close to your eye, I don't recommend this one. But basically what you can do is you can just put the liner right on your tight line, which is like right here, and just run it across. And so that gives your eye a bit more definition without having to go on the above the lash line. Some people also like to do it where they pick up their eye with their pinky finger, and then that's when you run the liner on your tight line. I tend to do it more the other way because I don't want to mess up my eyeshadow. But yes, that is tight lining. Alright you guys, the next term is fallout. So we're not talking about nuclear fallout here. We're talking about shadow fallout. So this happens when a shadow is more loose, I guess, and it just drops pigment on your cheekbone from when you're blending it in. So for example, let's say I take this purple shadow which has a ton of fallout. That's why I usually tend to tap my brush off. But if I take this and I don't tap my brush off and I put it on my, I start putting it on, you can see the shadow falling onto my cheek. So that's what we call fallout. So a good way to mitigate this is by leaving your bake on. Bake, which you learned a little about just a few minutes ago. So if you leave your bake on while you're doing your eyeshadow, when you brush away the bake, it'll brush away all the fallout and it won't stain your cheeks. Another way is just, you know, take a fluffy brush. I like to take my highlighter brush sometimes, load it with highlighter, and sometimes that helps. But no worries, if it's really on there, you can always take a wipe and just wipe it off. Or if you know that you're going to be using shadows with a lot of fallout, just do your eyeshadow before you do your foundation and concealer. That way if you do have some fallout, you can brush it off with a wipe and you're not messing up your foundation and concealer, right? So that brushed off pretty easily. And I'm just going to put a bit more highlighter on there to just hide that. Yeah, that's kind of on there. It looks like I'm going to have to wipe it off, but that's okay. We can always start fresh. So that's fallout. Okay, now that I've finished my makeup, let's talk about our next term, hitting pan. What? That sounds crazy. Are you hitting someone with a pan? No. What that means is when you've used up your whole product, like your whole maybe powder product, and you hit the empty side, like you see the empty pan, that's called hitting pan. Which is so sad. I hate when this happens, but it's also kind of satisfying when you've run through a full product. Okay, let's talk about our last term, a full beat. What? No, we're not hitting anyone. We're not beating anyone. What a full beat means is when your makeup looks amazing, looks glamorous, looks perfect, all put together. You've got on a full beat. You can also say a full face beat, or I'm gonna go beat my face. That means that you're applying makeup to get a perfect glamorous look. Okay friends, this is the finished look. We have baked and highlighted and contoured and done a full beat. I hope you liked today's video. If you did, please feel free to subscribe, and I hope to catch you guys the next time. Bye.